Welcome to the Gifts from the Edge podcast, where you are about to meet parents and professionals, educators and entrepreneurs who have taken the path less traveled, and by doing that, have made all the difference. Now it's time to step out of the ordinary. Here's your host, Andrew Lord.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Gifts from the Edge podcast. I'm Andrew Lord, and today we are interviewing Anita Collins. She is the director and founder of Muse Consulting. She is an author, an educator, an advocate, and a thought leader in the overlapping worlds of music and neuroscience, which she would say are probably not that different, even though they sound very different. So, Anita, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to have a chat today.
So, Anita, can you tell me about your research, what it is that you exactly do to combine the worlds of music and neuroscience and how that has a benefit for people?
So probably the easiest way is to tell you what my title is. And it's a self-made title because no one else really does what I do, but I'm a neuro-musical educator. And neuro being brain, musical, of course, being music, and then educated meaning I teach people about music and the brain.
Does that fit on a business card?
Yeah, well, neuro-musical educator does.
Yeah.
The explanation definitely doesn't.
It's an impressive title. I thank you for that. All right. Well, I thought we'd dive straight into it by just asking you a little bit about your background. And I listened to your TED talk, and you told a story about your interest in music and your interest in education sort of being birthed at the same time. Can you tell us about that? You know, your learning to read story.
Yeah, sure. It's funny when someone says, like, tell me about your background, I feel like going through like a resume. It's like I did this, I did this. But the main interest is I went to school, and so I'm the firstborn in my family, and I went to school and I did the normal school things, but I struggled to learn how to read fluently. Words were a bit of a jumble, and I only really realized this later, but I found that I was using my memory a lot more to remember things, and I was guessing things, and I was very good at guessing. And I was very good at reading the teacher's very tiny nonverbal communication about whether something was right or wrong.
Yeah.
So this has served me well in my profession. Yeah. But as a kid, I was learning it just for survival. Now, one of the things, and I mentioned I'm firstborn in my family for a reason. I'm the firstborn child, and my mother is and has always been a primary school teacher, but specifically in the later half of her career, she became a remedial reading or a reading recovery teacher as well, which meant she helped kids at the age of 6 who were struggling how to read. Now, the tension in the house came from the fact that I was the firstborn. I'm a tad stubborn, but having my mum try and help me with this issue that I was having when she was highly trained to do so just didn't work in the family environment. So I had a teacher she was my first grade teacher, and then she let me keep coming. She just said, just come to my class every morning. I think I came at 8:15, and she said, just come into the class and read. And what she basically was doing was exposing me to books for a long period of time without that pressure of home and having to read. So I wasn't reading, I was making stuff up. I was looking at the pictures and going, I think this is basically the story I'm getting from the picture. Yeah. And she would be getting ready for class and things like that. And then she'd look over and she'd go, that was good, but that's not quite the right word. Just have a look at that one word. And I'd go, oh, maybe that's a different word. So I'd either guess or I'd actually figure out what the word was. But I did it in a safe environment. So I did this for years. So kindergarten, I'm 6. I didn't get the opportunity. I was still trying really, 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 really hard, but I knew I was behind in my reading, and I was very good at hiding that I was behind. And then at the age of 9, there was a sort of elective band program that you got to do, and I was lucky enough to be picked for it. And I got given a clarinet. I actually rocked up to the door, and on the form it said Anita needs a flute. And I rocked up to the door and I said, I need a flute. And they went, we've run out. Here's a clarinet. So I just got randomly given a clarinet. It turned out it was perfect for me. I have short, stubby fingers. I'm shorter in stature. I have a great sort of mouth that's set for clarinet playing. I would have been absolutely rubbish at flute. So I got to learn this instrument, but more importantly, I was taught systematically how to read music. And about 6 months after that started, my first grade teacher, who was still helping me, said, "You know what? I think you can read now. I think you're okay. You don't need to come and see me anymore." So I didn't, and what I've been trying to solve my whole life is understanding if learning to read music in particular helped decode, unscramble, change, develop, I don't know what, something that was to do with text reading, with sound to symbol connection that led to reading. And the reason I'm so interested is because if I hadn't had that musical opportunity, how different, and I hadn't learned how to read, if those two truly are connected, then how different would my life journey have been? And I think it would have been wildly different. And I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I've had. I might have had different opportunities for sure, but I wouldn't have got a PhD. I wouldn't have done all these things that are heavily dependent on the ability to read. So I'm interested in understanding my own journey, but also then where does music sit in our current education system? Where does music sit in our current thinking about learning? And then how can I help people understand or challenge the ideas they have, but also maybe rethink what bucket or what place have they put it in education? Because there's some real myths around who should learn music and why should they learn music.
So why don't you, let's just cut to the chase. Why don't we dispel some of those myths straight away? Like, who should learn music? Like one thing that you said before, which was that your body type was perfect for the clarinet. I always thought that was, you know how they say that some people look like their pets? Well, I used to hang out at the conservatorium. My wife, went to the conservatorium, and I used to notice that some people, there was remarkable similarities between what they were studying music-wise and the way they looked. Yeah. So anyway, that's a sideline. Tell us about
that's a really good sideline, because we have, again, it feeds into all these myths. So to share my own story, so I studied at a conservatorium in Canberra, and clarinet class was in one room and flute class was next door. And I used to always be amazed that when you see them, we all used to come out, different doors at the same time, but we could see each other. When you saw the flute class, they were elfin-like. They had long limbs. They were all tall. They were all gorgeous. They all floated through the air. They were just amazing. You see the clarinet players come out. We've all got stubby fingers, short stature. We're a little bit heavier because we do a little bit more of the physical work to play our instrument.
Yeah.
We're a little more gregarious. Very funny group of people. So there are people who are suited. And a lot of people go, no, anyone can learn a musical instrument. It's like, well, no, because at an elite level, you don't see a basketball team that has someone who's 5'5" and someone who's 6'5". They're all the same height. They're all the same kind of body. To do something at an elite level, there is a genetic element that is very, very strong in that. Now, that's one of the myths. There's this whole idea that the only people who should learn music are those who are going to excel at it. And it's like, why on earth are those two things connected? Why do we put them there? But we do. And I've really thought a lot about where do we get those messages from? And one of those is things like Australia's Got Talent and, all the The Voice and all those different kinds of shows which put out this image that here is this person who has a genetically given, God-given, whichever way around you'd like to look at it, skill, which makes them elite and above everyone else and exceptional and incredible. And the funny thing I always find is that they project this idea that these people have never had a music lesson in their lives, that they're just like singing in the backyard or to their grandparents or something like that. And then suddenly they've been discovered because that's a really good story. It's hardly ever true.
Yeah.
Most of these people have had many, many, many important music educators and influencers and mentors all the way through to reach where they are at that current point when you see them on that stage. So there's this we've been fed this story that we are musical or not. That's the first. And when I walk into a room, I says, "Who put your hand up if you're not musical?" And it's like hands shoot up everywhere. It's like, that's our first problem, is that we are all born musical because we have to be, because we use our music processing network in order to learn how to speak. So any human being who can speak has a music processing network that is functioning and working really, really well. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
There's a difference between that and reaching an elite level where you are the best of the best of the best of the, 0.1% of the 1% that do something to another level. So I think the first answer is every child should learn music. And I don't like the phrase every child deserves to learn music, because it's this whole concept that it's you deserve something, like you deserve ice cream because you did something good.
Yeah, it's a reward.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Every child needs music, and what they need it for is both to learn the art form, and I'm not taking away from that at all, but to also be exposed to or able to get the cognitive benefits that come along with learning music. And so that's one of the biggest myths that I think come into it, is the non-musical one. That's probably the biggest one. And then what comes on top of that are the economic ones of it's only for those who can pay for it. It shouldn't be supplied within the regular educational experience, whereas it's in the curriculum, but how it's applied is entirely different as well. So that's probably the biggest one of why do we do it? And I call it place and purpose. What's the place of it in each child's life? And it's to have that musical and that cognitive development. And that comes to the purpose as well. Why are we doing it? And at what point do we have kids had enough? It's like, you've had enough to have the permanent cognitive development. You absolutely appreciate the art form in a very deep way now. That's all you need. Yeah. We don't have to hold on to these kids and make them keep going past a certain point where we know that will have occurred.
Yeah. And that sort of brings up something that we've talked about earlier, and that is, Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk talks about creativity in schools. And I know you've got some views on music and how it sits within those, how it's bundled together with all of those other arts, which we can talk about in a minute. But there's also this idea that we're steered away from things like music because we may not achieve that elite level. If you had a magic wand and you could speak into the way that curriculum is developed in schools, I don't think it's the way it's the curriculum structured so much as the culture that's in schools. And some cultures that in schools that say, unless it's going to turn into a job, it's not worth doing. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So much in there. I would agree with what I would call economic rationalism of education, and that's not just the education itself. Like, that's also to do with parents about what's the purpose of school, of schooling, and how do we do the best for our children, knowing that school is meant to lead to a job, but it's also meant to producing a human. And a human is a lot more than their job.
A happy human.
A happy human, or at least a human who understands themselves and then also understands others. I think I do struggle with the curriculum because it leads to poor educational choices within school environments, because there's so much that needs to be done, and I'm not liked for this term, and I totally understand that, but at the moment we have what I call the tapas menu of arts education, which is they're very small, very delicious plates of lovely things, but you get only a little bit of each, and at the end, you're still not very full. So it's not only that the current curriculum structure isn't working for music, it's not actually working for any of the arts. But it's really interesting how the different arts are viewed. It's like, if you draw, or even if you colour in for pleasure, and if we think of colouring in, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean actually understand colour and the relationship between them, and understanding the meanings behind colour, how, physical techniques of all those things, that's okay to do for pleasure, but it's not okay to learn a musical instrument for pleasure, because you have to be amazing. So there's this really strange, with these different ideas. And part of my magic wand would be, we look at schooling as a year-long activity at the moment. So within a year, we need to fit in music, drama, dance, visual arts, media arts in some states. And it's like, that's the tapas menu. That's when we need a little bit of each. I would love to turn that sideways and actually go, when do students across the breadth of their educational experience, even from preschool right up to sort of their year 12 or their exit credential, whatever they do, where do different arts assist those students at different times? We know that music learning is very, very powerful in the very early years, the 3 to 8 years of age, because it's helping the students develop their language center as well as their reading and writing abilities. If we think of, literacy is a really important part of what we do, it's not the only part for sure. That seems to be a time when more emphasis on music might be good, because we can set up that system. When is visual arts very powerful? It's incredibly powerful at the age of 3, because it actually helps children to understand meaning and to express meaning about what they understand about the world through line, through drawing, through shading, through color. It can, and so what could it be right at the beginning? There's different ways to think about it. When is drama, and when is the understanding of motive and intent and all the things that come with that? When is that most powerful and could be used? So could we look across the experience of the vertical experience, the chronological experience of a child across the years of their education, and not look sideways, which is across how much do I have to fit into a year? Because it's causing a lot of schools, very understandably, to kind of just divvy up the time they have and go, well, here's my little tapas plate of music and we'll do this one here. And the problem is, if you don't do continuous music learning, you don't get that cognitive benefit. If you don't do continuous dance learning, you also don't get the benefit that comes from that. So it's about the continuity that's needed within the arts in order to get both the appreciation of the art form as well as the cognitive benefit that come from all of them. That's really important. So it would be literally upending the Jenga thing that we have as education and going, okay, if I had a blank piece of paper and I looked at the cognitive development of a child, what do they need to have and when and how? And shift that around a little bit.
Yeah. And as I said to you before we came on, I have a lot of homeschoolers or home education parents that listen to this podcast, and they have that luxury. They have that beautiful position of being able to think about their own child individually rather than en masse, and so to make some of those decisions. So it's great ideas that you're putting out there, so thank you. Something that you said made me think about the quantity versus quality thing too. Like, we often take that quantitative approach. We've got to jam so much in, and therefore we've got to do it at these particular times, but a lot of that time, only 20% of something might be retained because either the child's just not ready for it or they're completely disengaged in that lesson. But if you can sort of hit them with something that's going to engage them and excite them and lift their spirits, then you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak. There's going to be a lot more learning that happens in those moments. Having said that, I also understand that even within music and even within drama and all those other things, there is a role for discipline and a role for, regiment, and, it's music time, it's music lesson, and it's time to do that. So do you have any thoughts on that, like the best way to approach, delivering those experiences for young people?
Yeah, we talk a lot about engagement and a lot about, and it's an interesting one. And I think for me, the pendulum swung a little bit too far towards we have to create these experiences where they're highly engaged, they're highly sensory infused experiences, all that stuff, because we think that's when learning happens. But what we do understand about music learning is the power of music learning actually comes in the continuous nature of it. And so I often talk to principals and I say, if it is more powerful to have 10 minutes of music at the start of every day than it is to have 50 minutes before lunch on Wednesday. you will get more out of 10 minutes a day. It's exactly the same amount of time, but it's the fact that you revisit it daily, because it's like daily brain gym. It basically tones the brain every single time you touch that experience. The length of that experience, especially the younger the kids are, is actually detrimental to that.
Yeah, right.
It's very, very important that they have it continually. And one of the things about music learning is one of the two of the mechanisms they're related within the brain that it develops are persistence and resilience. And that actually comes from consistently doing something, often when you're not having a good time, or where it's hard, or where it's difficult, or where things aren't working, because that's actually when you start problem solving, to going, if I just keep doing it the same way, it's going to stay the same way. It's not going to get better. I need to do something different in order to change the outcome. And that what in essence in the brain, that's problem solving. That's the mechanism of problem solving. Now, the more and more a student is trying to get a scale, or trying to get a melody in a piece of music, or trying to get a rhythm, the more they go through different ways of trying to do the same thing, the more challenging it is for the brain. And actually the greater cognitive development comes from that. So in many cases, music learning needs the whiz bang, which is often the performance, the thing that you're aiming for. I think, again, speaking to your parents who are homeschooling, that's one of the challenges, I would imagine, because of you haven't got an audience at your doorstep, like, you know, all of Year 7 or assembly or something like that. And making sure that you stick to a performance schedule. So actually going, you're going to start learning these pieces in February, but you're going to perform them in May, and there's a date in the diary and an audience present and an appropriate space for that performance, so that it kind of leads up to the performance. Because it's actually the learning that they do in music, while the performance itself is not incredibly important, it's the fact that they know that that thing is coming, which propels them towards that problem solving that they have to do. And even if the performance doesn't go well, that's actually the point where resilience gets learnt. You have to fall, you have to fail, you have to, and none of us like it, but it's something you can't avoid. So why not use the opportunity to learn that resilience as you go through? So I think it's again, it's slightly different, and we have this cookie cutter, and we often have this cookie cutter way of going, well, every subject is the same, every bit of learning is the same, but it's really not. It's what every subject needs is different. And we need to creatively make sure that we have all of those elements in there to get the most out of it and to make it as beneficial as possible for everybody involved.
Yeah. No, I'm cheering in the background as you're saying all this stuff, because I've got a program called Project Space, and we do exactly the same thing. You know, we have a showcase event at the end, and exactly what you said, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter how it goes on showcase, like it does, but it's the weeks before that, you know, leading up to it, that adds the authenticity, that says this counts. Somebody is going to look at it at one point, and I care about it because of that. Means that they're invested. So good.
It's such an important experience for everybody to have, and the arts is just a really easy way to do it.
Yes. So you've got a book, the Music Advantage. Tell us about that.
So it came.
Who's it for, and
all those things.
Yes.
It's for. I wrote it with parents and teachers in mind. And because, you know, they're absolutely groups who have an overlap most of the time as well, but they're also they see the world when they're reading it through a particular lens. So I had to write in such a way where I could bring a parent in and go, yes, that's my child. I get that sort of experience or whatever I'm observing. But also a teacher can go, yeah, I've seen that before. What does that mean? So then my way was to weave in all the science to kind of make sense of what was happening, and also try and challenge. Sometimes we look at a situation and we go, oh, this means this, A equals B kind of thing. Or A equals A, really, oranges and apples. But I sort of went, sometimes what we think we're looking at is not what we're looking at. It's actually something different. So it's trying to help people have a gateway into the science of it without going, oh my goodness, this is so hard to read, I can't get through it. So I've used lots of stories and lots of things that I've observed, or I've had conversations with others and they've observed about real kids and real situations and real reactions, and then going, okay, well, what's happening inside their brain when this is occurring, and how has music contributed to that, helped them with that, challenged them with that, all of those different kinds of ways of looking at it. So my hope is it's an easy and enjoyable read for busy parents and busy teachers.
That's a challenging one to write.
Yeah.
Yes. No, very good. And the learning platform, so again, for parents and teachers, is that right?
Yeah, mostly for teachers at the moment, where I'm slowly working with parents as well.
It's called Build Better Brains.
No, Bigger Better Brains.
Bigger Better Brains. Sorry, yes.
Bigger Better Brains, yeah. And the name came about because when I was doing my PhD, I kept writing in the corner of the research, musicians' brains are bigger, musicians' brains are better. And so it's there for teachers to access. So again, it's a way of helping them access the research in a way that works for them. There's online courses, there's lots and lots of free stuff on there. There's posters, there's explanations on, what do these things actually mean? What are the mechanisms of decision making and how does music help that? And here's a 2-minute video that explains it. So it's all different kinds of ways of helping to share that research in a way that teachers and parents can use. And we do a lot of work on social media as well to help provide things that people can share. And that's the main thing, to kind of, get underneath the skin of those myths and start changing the public opinion.
Yeah, cool. So can you tell us, I mean, a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast are also leaders in their own field. They are people who are striving to make a positive difference in their world, either through their research or through, something that they feel called to do, something that's very important to them. Your work, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but from what I've seen and researched about you, your work kind of came to prominence at that moment when you had you wrote the TED Ed script, and then that led to the TED Talk and, the Winston Churchill Fellowship and all sorts of things snowballed from there. So 2 things. One is, can you tell us a little bit, what life was like before and after, compare those 2? Yeah. And also, what advice would you give to someone who's not there yet? Because many of the people listening are waiting for they're still in the wilderness. They're still doing the hard yards. They're doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do, but things haven't broken through for them yet. Yeah.
Okay. The first one was, what was like before and after.
Before and after, yeah.
I didn't see it as before and after, but I know that's kind of how it looks on the outside. So just to share with the viewers, I'm still a practicing high school teacher, but I've also I did 12 years in university being a teacher trainer, so teaching teachers that are now in schools. And I was avoiding my marking. I did not want to sit down and do my marking. And I saw this thing on TED Ed. So they make educational videos, and they've got a pitch opportunity. So you basically write, I think it was 150 words of an idea, and they read. I didn't realize it, but they get 300 of these a week every single year, and they read them all, and then they pick out the top 5 to interview. So I had an interview with a guy in New York, and then they pick one of those to go on. I didn't know all this at the time. I just went, oh, this is cool. Let's keep going.
So long as I don't have to do marking.
Yeah, I was very happy. And then, because he interviewed me and he said, oh, look, we'd like you to, write 600 words. And what I ended up doing was sitting down in a cafe the Monday morning after I talked to him, and I ended up writing basically the whole script that you now hear in that video. And I just wrote it in one go. And that told me it was inside my head, and it was there. It just needed an avenue to get out. And as you said, many, many things snowballed from there. But I think life before and life after isn't that different to me, because one of the things that grounds me is that I'm a practicing teacher. Yesterday morning at 7:10 a.m. in Canberra, I went to rehearsal for the first week of the year with my most senior students. And tomorrow morning, I'll be doing the same thing with a different set of students. I'm still practicing my craft. And to me, I'm still a teacher. I'm just doing it through different mediums, in different ways, to different audiences, to anybody who will listen. That's what's happened. And I think the couple of things I've learned about this is that, or this journey that I've been on and continue to sort of head through, is I always keep saying yes to almost everything, basically, and to my detriment at times. And I will add to that, and I know people will be out there going, I feel like my head's going to explode. I'm doing so much stuff. I totally get that. And one of the big things I've learned is how to say no or not yet, or those sorts of things. But I think I've just always kept in mind, what's the worst thing that could happen? And a lot of the time it is just, you don't get the grant, you don't get the prize, you don't get the opportunity. Someone says no, but it's like, okay, well, that's fine. Now I'll go in this direction. And I think it's trying everything. The TED Ed talk was a perfect example of, I was avoiding something, so I went and did something else, and that really helped me. And continue to do that. I've had a Churchill Fellowship, which is great. I've now got what's called a Churchill Impact Grant, which means I get to continue the work I did when I went on my Churchill trip, which I think I can see, snowballing into something absolutely huge. And that's great, but it's scary. It's really, really scary. But part of it is going, what am I just going to do today? What am I going to do tomorrow? Not thinking about the big picture and figuring out where my importance is and what I can do for others. And the only other thing that if there's some people who are listening will be visual people, but I imagine a really dark stage in a really dark auditorium or theatre, and there's a single spotlight on the stage. And I'm on the stage, and all I was doing for an incredibly long period of time was walking around that spotlight. I didn't want to get into the light. I could see it there, and it's like, maybe I wonder what it's like in there. And I kept walking around and walking and walking around in my head. And what ended up happening with particularly the TEDx talk was the one that really set me over the edge, because you literally do walk into a spotlight. And it was that moment where I went, it's time for me to walk into the light. And if anyone, and walk into my light, I know it sounds kooky and all those sorts of things, but it's about going, when's the right time? And sometimes you're forced to, but other times it's like, now I don't mind the light on my face, because it means that I'm getting an opportunity to do something where I can help others. And honestly, most of it is just helping others, and particularly helping music teachers to understand their worth and their value, because so often they are undervalued, and so often they feel like they're not understood. And I want to help them find their own spotlights and walk straight into them.
Yeah, that's such a key point. And for anyone listening, that's for you as well. You are valued, you are appreciated for what you do. And just want to draw my attention to something that Anita said earlier too, which was, it doesn't feel that different. I think that's the amazing thing about family and about working with young people in particular, is they are so raw and so honest, and they just keep you, they keep your feet on the ground all the time. I think that's a blessing to have as well. That's really cool. We talked about, open doors and things changing for you. You've had the opportunity to do a program with Guy Sebastian. Can you tell us a little bit about, you mentioned before about The Voice and some of the shows like that create this almost artificial perception of what it's like to be discovered and to be found. Can you tell us what Guy's perspective is on that scenario?
I didn't really talk too much about that. We got stuck, talking in radio booths as we were there all day about TV shows that we would watch. But I think what I learned a few things from him, but I also learned a few things from the production crew. I learned a lot from the the director, because it was in a, it's a different art form to mine. So I was constantly asking them about how they, the cameraman, how they do this, the sound guy, what are you listening for? And Guy was part of that experience, but there were all the teachers and the people that I was learning from as well at the same time. So it was a very rich learning experience for me. I think the golden thing I learned from Guy, which I've kept, I asked him, I posted something. I think it was an article in The Conversation, and a whole bunch of people had just gone, "You're wrong. What are you talking about? Get out of our space. You're not allowed here." All that sort of, you've done the wrong thing. And I turned to him and I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Don't engage. Just don't engage in what they're talking about, their point of view. Be true to yourself and what's important to you, and always keep that front of mind." And it was very powerful when he said it, because it was so, it wasn't a revelation to him. It was his mantra, I think, for pretty much every day of his life, is just stay true to you. And that's been really, really, really important to me. From there, I think what I find interesting, and I mentioned the production team as well, because I think when you meet someone like Guy, and I've met quite a number of amazing musicians and people who've been through that experience of being discovered, or seemingly being discovered, is that they are incredibly humble and they're wonderful within their art form. So they're not the ones that are going, I'm discovered, I'm amazing, I'm unique, I'm elite, I'm special. It's actually the production around it. So I got to know a lot about how TV is made, and I'm still working within TV as well. I'm starting to do a whole bunch of stuff in the States at the moment as well. So watching how they come to the point of making a TV production, what's the thinking behind it. And a lot of it is about painting a story and then having everything else feed into that story. So it's made me think very deeply about the stories we tell, which stories should be told or shouldn't be told. And I think all stories need to be told. And also the same story from different perspectives. And I think that's what I've learned as well, is so much of when I walk into a room is I'm not walking in there to tell someone something or teach them something. I'm walking into a room to learn from them about the perspective or the lens through which they look at the world. And that really helps me with teaching kids as well, because it's front of mind for me all the time, which is, how are you understanding? How are you hearing the world? How are you viewing the world? Where are you at right now? And as soon as I do that, I know I teach better, because I'm learning from them immediately. And that's really, really important to me as I walk through it. So there's many, that series keeps giving back in terms of everything it taught me, and being able, again, that's one of those things that I walked into going, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been on television. I don't know how these production crews work. I don't know what they're trying to achieve, but trying to just take it as much in as you can and learn from it and contribute where you can, but continue that journey of understanding and taking things away from it. It was a really important thing. I still remember all of my senses were heightened every single time that I went to a filming day, and they were heightened from the moment I walked on the plane. And it was how do I take in everything? How do I absorb it all? And how do I not lose this moment?
Yeah. Oh, cool. Anita, it's been so great to talk with you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, sharing your gifts from your journey. It's much appreciated, and I know that it's going to be a blessing to a lot of people. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to chat today.
And there you have it. What an awesome woman. What an awesome journey she has been on, and a fascinating conversation that we've had today. Anita really does blend many of the things that I'm personally interested in, but also things that I believe are vital in the world of education and community leadership as well. How music shapes us, how amazing our brain is, the creative capacity of every human being. There's just so much in there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. The key takeaways for me were the music processing is a part of our brain function that develops as we learn to speak. I thought that was amazing. This reinforces the fact that everyone is musical, and like she said, we're not all going to attain to that level of elite musician, but it does mean that at our core, we are musical beings. I loved the phrase that she used to topple the Jenga stack of traditional education. And, speaking with Anita, both on the podcast and before the podcast, I know she doesn't see herself as a real rebel. She's still in the system, unlike me. She's still in there making changes from within and helping teachers, which I think is wonderful. But even with that willingness to stay, she's also stepped out. She's also been on her own adventure, literally with the Churchill Fellowship. And she has brought back gifts to share. So I think that's fantastic. I loved how she pointed out the importance of accountability and working towards a goal, working towards a performance. It's exactly what we do in Project Space, and I'll put a link below if you're interested in checking out that program. I loved how she mentioned that music can bring out persistence, resilience, problem solving, the flow state. All of these things that I think are so often overlooked in traditional education, but these are the things that are going to help us be successful in real life. So, I could go on and on. There's so much good stuff there, which is, of course, why I wanted to share this episode with you. If you'd like to find out more about Anita and the work that she does, just use the links below. If you're listening to this on the blog, or the links in the description if you're listening to this on Spotify. And I want to remind you that today's episode is proudly sponsored by Dangerous Minds, the Dangerous Minds course. Now, Dangerous Minds is a 40-day program. It took me nearly 12 months to put together, but I am so happy with it now. There is 5 modules: the positioned mind, the growth focused mind, the happy mind, the optimized mind, and the call. And all of those modules are designed to get everyone in your family thinking, feeling, and living at the top of their game. It's normally $297, but if you use the code DM50 at the checkout, you'll get 50% off that. Save half price. I'll put a link just below in the description so you can check that out. It has been wonderful to meet with you here again, out on the edge, sharing wisdom from those who have taken a different path, and by that, made all the difference. That's all from me for today. Bye for now.